But all of a sudden, over our right-hand shoulder, the second plane came and went right in front of us, and it turned what we call like an 8 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and went right in front of us straight into the building. Wow. And interesting, the blast from that plane going into the tower actually blew us back into our home.
Hi, welcome back to Let Me Ask You Something, the weekly podcast where I, M.D. Pittman, talk to everyday, ordinary people about something extraordinary in their lives. Now, this week I talked to author of Out of the Shadows of 9/11, Christina Ray Stanton. She wrote about her experiences as a survivor of September 11th. She was 6 blocks away at her home in her apartment, some 20 some odd floors up, when the attacks happened. We get into that, as well as the aftermath of what happened to her with September 11th, and getting a little bit of a COVID discussion, too, of how that's impacted her and other survivors. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Christina Ray Stanton. All right, and we are live. Welcome back to Let Me Ask You Something, the weekly podcast where I ask everyday people about something extraordinary in their lives. And now, today we have somebody who lived through the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001. So, Christina, let me ask you something. How has COVID impacted you as a 9/11 survivor?
Yeah, they're definitely related in my mind, though at this point I'm not sure it can be proven, but in my mind they're related, and certainly they have found a lot of correlation between those who inhaled the toxins, the toxic dust from 9/11, who later got COVID and got a very bad case. So that has definitely been proven, and in my case, I believe they're related as well. So I did get COVID. I got a very bad case. I was hospitalized twice, and actually told that I had a 50% chance of surviving it, meaning the other 50% was I was not going to, which is what I definitely homed in on. And I do believe that I probably had such a bad case because my health has been compromised from 9/11. But thank goodness I'm here doing fine. And but a lot of people who went through 9/11 weren't that blessed, and there was definitely an uptick in people who died, whose health was compromised through 9/11.
So, what type of effects do you have? And then we won't dwell long on COVID, but because I want to get to your book. But what effects have you had from not being with these pre-existing conditions with COVID? What have you? I mean, you said that you have lost your taste.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, from my understanding, that COVID kind of hit you where it hurts. Meaning, if you had something going on already or a pre-existing condition, that it exacerbated it and made it worse. So I had some issues already with abnormally low blood pressure, for instance. And that's one of the reasons why I was hospitalized, is I literally couldn't walk or even stand up and not faint. And I still am decently I sit a lot. I still have, I feel like, dizzy issues, and I still feel short of breath. But some long standing issues that I've had since COVID, which I got, by the way, in March 2020.
Okay.
I never, yeah, right. So it's been, gosh, just,
a year and a half.
But I never did regain my sense of taste and smell. And I understand that I suffered some nerve damage. And so I have very strange sensations over my body at different times, which is kind of freaky. It kind of feels like a roach, for instance, is crawling across my leg. And I look down and realize, oh no, it's my nerve damage acting up. I also used to be a great sleeper, no longer. I really doze for the most part. And just, things like that. But I'll be honest with you, I'll take them. I really did feel that it was trying to kill me. The virus was trying to kill me. And it was a real visceral kind of feeling that, wow, this is actually what's happening here. And I still actually feel very grateful that I'm still alive. And I haven't lost that. I'm still very glad to be here.
I am glad you're here too, because you have a book out that I want to talk about here. So well, tell me a little bit about this book that you have. It's a survivor's tale.
Yeah, so it's all about 9/11 and surviving 9/11. I'm actually from Florida. I was
Okay.
born and raised in Florida. I moved up to New York like a lot of young people do to be an actress, to try to navigate the acting community and see if I got a shot on Broadway. So I moved there in 1993 when I was 23. So that tells you how old I am. So yes,
just a couple years more than me.
yeah. I'm still a young thing. But at any
Yeah.
rate, so I moved there in 1993 to be an actress. And one thing you learn when you move to New York City and you're not from there is, whoa, things are really expensive. So my first order of business was finding a job. And I'd heard through the grapevine that being a tour guide is actually a great job to have. So
Okay.
I spent a year preparing to take the test to get a license. And yes, you have to take a test to get a license. So at any rate, I got licensed in 1995, and I was giving tours of the World Trade Center right off the bat. So I was doing walking tours of the World Trade Center. So I knew it intimately, for years before the attacks. But really, our story comes from surviving it is living so close to it. So we lived within 6 blocks of the World Trade Center site of the complex. And so my book is all about that perspective of being a resident in the attack zone. And, there's been, I understand, over 600 books written about 9/11. Yeah. But none from my particular perspective of what it was like for a resident. I mean, you hear a lot about, there's a lot of books on terrorists and terrorism and the planes and the towers, all of which are definitely worthwhile books, and definitely we need to know as much as possible about all those angles. But mine is just again, from a resident's perspective, how we navigated those attacks, how it affected us, because it did affect us in a very real way. So that's what the book is about. So, and it also, I have to say, it has a faith element in there as well, because I leaned heavily on my faith in the aftermath of it. And I really kind of rediscovered my childhood faith in the aftermath, because it really threw me for a loop. And I talk about that in my book of just the journey of how that changed our lives and changed our hearts and changed really our trajectory in life, like what we were doing. Everything changed after 9/11 for us. My husband and I, I'm speaking of.
Yeah. I mean, it changed everything for the world, but more importantly, it changed everybody who lived in New York City. Now, I misspoke. I was looking at one book and I was referencing another. Is Out of the Shadows of 9/11 is the name of the book. I referenced your survivor's tale, which is the faith in the face of COVID-19, which we can talk about at another time, I think, because I think this will be 9/11 being the 20th anniversary. We'll take up our conversation here. And speaking of the 20th anniversary, what is your reflections on that? 20 years since that attack.
It's amazing to think that it has been 20 years. And, when I actually just wrote an article about like what I'd want young kids to know about 9/11 20 years later. And I was saying in the article that I definitely want, kids, for instance, to know about 9/11. I actually am still a tour guide, and I tour a lot of high schoolers from around the country. And I have to say, I am disheartened that pretty across the board, no matter where they're from, what state, there's it's kind of a one note knowledge that they seem to have, unless, let's say, a student just happens to be just super interested and had done research themselves. But it's pretty one-dimensional. 9/11 is such a layered story. There's so much that goes into the attacks, and so I've taken it upon myself that whenever I can, I educate, which is again part of my book. It's just an attempt at educating the younger generation about 9/11. But I have to say, 20 years later, apart from wanting kids the history of 9/11 and the importance of 9/11 to be passed down to younger generations is just feeling like the United States has changed a lot as a country, and I feel like there was a loss of innocence on that day. Yeah. And I feel like there has been a decline just in general, and it's in optimism. Yeah. Kind of like a rise in skepticism ever since. And I'm myself, I'm a positive person. Yeah. And I look at things positively, but I still feel like there's no denying that it's had a kind of a collective aura. It's cast a kind of collective aura, through the years.
Yeah. Now, there's that mantra you hear, or the meme you see every September 11th or leading up to it, never forget. Yeah. But do you think some people have forgotten with time, as far as it's not front of mind every day as opposed to those first few years after?
Yes, and I do think that there's something natural about that. By the time, me and you were growing up, Pearl Harbor just seems so far away and so long ago. And I've read that, like, kids nowadays, I read actually a quote from somebody. There's been a relatively recent study done by, I think it was University of Wisconsin-Madison, of what kids in high school know or don't know, or what they've been taught or not been taught. And one kid said, it just seems like it was so long ago and so far away. And it wasn't. I mean, this was 20 years. 20 years is a blink of an eye, really. Yeah. And so I think there's just some natural progression as time moves on and different dramas happen and different world events that we just kind of all move on. But I don't think that it's proving to have the longevity that I think it should have, or just a spotlight should still be there, and pretty glaringly after 20 years, because 20 years is not a long time.
Yeah. Now, as a tour guide, where were you when the planes attacked? Where when they struck the towers? Where were you? And tell me a little bit about that day from your perspective.
I wasn't touring on that day. I was actually still in bed, which is strange because I'm such an early riser. But I was still asleep. Again, we lived 6 blocks away from the World Trade Center complex, and we lived interesting in this building on their 24th floor. And we had a 300 square foot terrace. And this terrace overlooked the Twin Towers, overlooked the World Trade Center complex. And if anybody ever wants to look up, so I have a lot of pictures. And you can see there's a picture of us on our terrace with the Twin Towers in the background. You can just see how close we were. And that really was the issue for us. We were so close. We were standing on our terrace. My husband came, grabbed me out of bed, dragged me onto the terrace, and we were watching the North Tower burn. And it was like we were watching some kind of a big screen TV. It was insane. We did think that somebody had snuck in a bomb, just because we didn't see the first plane go in, and we didn't turn on the TV. But all of a sudden, over our right-hand shoulder, the second plane came and went right in front of us, and it turned what we call like an 8 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and went right in front of us straight into the building. Wow. And interesting, the blast from that plane going into the tower actually blew us back into our home. Really? And we had these really big French doors that was almost like a retractable wall if you had them both open at the same time. So the blessing of that was that the fact that we had them both open. And so instead of being blown back into the doors, we were blown into the apartment. Okay. So it knocked me out. I woke up with my dog jumping on my body, on my torso, because he was just so upset and so scared, who I'm sure he saw it himself. And I heard my husband say something like, "We got to get out of here. Do you want your shoes?" And I remember thinking,
how long were you out for?
We think not too long, probably just a few minutes, really. Okay. My husband wasn't knocked unconscious. I just was. And it took me a little bit to rally, right? Because I didn't, also too, the impact of the plane flying, it flew only 500 feet above us. Which was very close, and it really hurt my hearing for days. It actually permanently hurt my hearing, just so you know. But I was having a hard time putting my act together, and I couldn't hear what had just happened. There was some shock in that as well, and I hit my head pretty hard. So once I kind of collected myself, I didn't put on shoes. I ran out into our lobby floor, and then of course it kicks in. You're supposed to, in an emergency, not take the elevator. So we ran down the stairs. My husband grabbed our dog. Thank goodness he had also grabbed his wallet and things that we needed. We get outside, and that's the time I realized, wow, no shoes. I'm in my pajamas. But they wouldn't allow us back into the building. They're like, nope, everybody has to evacuate. Nobody's allowed back in, only out and out, down the elevator and out. So where we were, if we lived at 21 West Side Highway, that was our address. That is directly south of the Twin Towers. Mm-hmm. So for us to get as far away from the danger as possible, which is what your body kicks in and wants to do, right? It's just, your inner alarm is screaming, get away. For us, the farthest away we could get was Battery Park. So if you ever look at Manhattan, the whole island ends in a 25-acre park, which is at the very southern tip of the island. It's where people go to get the ferries that go to the Statue of Liberty. So for instance, right? Okay. So we went down there where we thought we were safe. As it turns out, that actually ended up being not a safe area. It was a trap, because we ended up being trapped there when the towers came down, because it's almost surrounded by rivers. It has the New York Harbor and the Hudson and the East River, because Manhattan kind of ends in like a semicircle. So there was nothing left to let us get out of that trapped area except to go north. But north are the Twin Towers, the down Twin Towers. Yes. And we were surrounded by smoke that threatened to asphyxiate us. We were completely covered with that dust and debris from the towers coming down. Yeah. And it was very scary. My husband and I actually said goodbye to each other. We just figured there's nothing any far worse in that situation means we die. We're as low as we can get with this. And we did actually watch people pitch themselves into the New York Harbor and try to swim to Governor's Island. And we actually thought about it, but we couldn't because we had our dog. Yeah. But it was a chaotic, terrible scene. Then all of a sudden I look out in the water, and I see all of these boats coming to our area. And unbeknownst to us, the U.S. Coast Guard knew that there were thousands of us trapped in Battery Park. They issued a CB radio call saying, hey, maritime industry folks, boat owners, boat operators, go down and to Battery Park and start picking people up and rescue them off of Manhattan, because we couldn't breathe. We were trapped. We were covered with this terrible dust. Yeah. And it's the largest boat evacuation in history. It's larger than Dunkirk. And a lot of people haven't heard of it. It's called the 9/11 boat evacuation. And by the way, if you haven't heard of it, it's actually, there's a little 10-minute wonderful video on YouTube narrated by Tom Hanks called Boat Lift. I cannot. And
I'll make sure to link that in the show notes, because
I can't recommend it enough. You actually see us for a little bit in one of the videos that's in it. At any rate, so we were evacuated to New Jersey, and we were homeless for a couple of weeks. We lived so close to the World Trade Center that we couldn't get back to our apartment for actually several different reasons. And we kind of couch surfed for a while, which I talk about in my book. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also my husband found out that a fraternity brother that he was close to died in the North Tower. We went to his memorial service, never found any of his body. And it was just my husband went to big depression. And our dog, actually, of all things, actually hovered between life and death for quite a while, because, when we were covered with that dust, animals want to lick their fur clean.
It's clean, yeah.
But we all know what was in that dust. It was wood, it was glass, it was anything you'd find in a room. Yeah. And the glass had literally shredded his insides. So, it's just for us, to tell you the truth, again, homeless. It also meant we were unemployed. It actually took away our jobs, the attacks did. So like all that together, just for us, it felt like it just kept going on and on and on.
How long did it take for you to get back to some sense of normalcy?
So we were allowed back into our home after 12 days. But when we got back, guess what we had done? we left our terrace doors.
Yeah, so you had all the rain and debris and wind and
12 days.
Birds and
yes. It wasn't livable. So we ended up, trying to make the best of it, but it would just, and people can see pictures of what that looked like. I actually didn't take pictures of our apartment, but I have found other pictures that people took of their apartments, and I've put them on our website just so you, like, here's what it looked like. At any rate.
Yeah, and that is ChristinaRayStanton.com. I'll make sure to link that too.
Yeah. So we ended up just going down to where I'm from, Florida, my hometown. And down in Florida, we actually got therapy. We started showing symptoms of PTSD right off the bat.
Yeah.
So I thought that was for returning war veterans or things.
Oh no, yeah. It could be any trauma. I mean.
Yeah. Well, I was 32 at the time. My husband was 35. We'd only been married a year and a half. We'd only lived in that apartment for 2 months. We were just like starting out in life, and we were so not prepared to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Which is where the faith thing kind of came in the aftermath, because I just felt like it blindsided us so much on so many different levels and in so many ways that we almost had to start over again, to tell you the truth. We almost really had to start from our own kind of ground zero, without sounding too cliche-ish, because it just really throws for a loop. So
now your book, Out of the Shadows of 9/11, it won an independent publisher and IBPA Benjamin Franklin Award.
Yeah.
What is that award? Can you talk a little bit about that award, and what does that mean to you to win something for your experience? I mean,
it meant a lot for me, because I actually have a degree in English from college. So writing wasn't a foreign concept, and I had written before, but honestly, I'm not a professional writer. I'd written some columns for different things in the past, but I was certainly not a professional writer.
You are now.
It took me 6 years to write that book, right?
I can imagine, especially with all the reliving the trauma and experiences. I mean, I'm sure it was hard to write, especially some aspects of it.
Oh, it was. There was a couple times it was absolutely brutal. I remember, especially when it came to reliving that day, that probably 50 pages alone took me a year, because it was so hard to relive, and it depressed me so much. And life goes on. I still have to work. I'm married. We have new responsibilities, and I was doing this as a side project.
Yeah.
That ended up taking over emotionally, and I tried hard to not let it. I mean, I had to go on.
What drove? I mean, is that what drove you? The need to go, having to go on? Is that what drove you to finish that? Because a lot of people would just give up.
Right. So as a tour guide, I take thousands of people on tours per year. Right after the 9/11, when I would give tours, people pretty much knew, what had happened, what had gone on. But actually, very quickly, I've talked to other tour guides, they've had the same experience. Within like 2 years, there was a major drop off of what it seemed people knew from 9/11, especially kids. And I was like, whoa. And so I kind of said, well, I'm going to be that person. I'm going to educate. And so I started spending a lot of time on my tours at the memorials. There were different memorials in the first, several years, but I spent a lot of time talking about it, and people wanted to hear it. But writing a book was another form of education. Do you understand what I'm saying? For people who don't come up to New York, who don't have me as a tour guide, I just looked at it as another form of being able to tell people and expand their understanding of 9/11. Because, as many as books as there are out there, I just feel like there's not, there can't be enough voices to try to, I guess, just have people really understand and expand their knowledge of what went on that day. So to tell the truth, the desire to educate was part of it, but also I did want to talk about my faith in this book. And again, people who are not Christians have told me they don't get offended by reading my book, which is important. I definitely didn't want that to go on. So that was good to hear. So it's probably fine for people who don't have who
A similar faith.
worship another faith or don't have any faith, and that's good to hear. But I did want to talk about how that helped mold me in that tumultuous aftermath of how faith kind of helped me get out of that hole that my husband and I had really gotten ourselves in. So it was an interest in sharing my faith, and it was also an interest in educating.
Wow. So was that what the need to educate, was that what really prompted writing the book, or was there kind of a singular moment that says, I need to get a book out?
Yeah, there was, and it had to do with my faith. I felt I was in a church service, and I felt there was a strong voice that actually came out of the blue and said it, and it was one of those things where like, you really write a book? But there was another one too. So there is a faith-based aspect there, but there was another one. My niece, who I think at the time was at 9 or 10, came up to me and said, Auntie, I was asked for a school project to try to interview somebody who had a firsthand account of 9/11. Do you know anybody that I can interview? And I was like, excuse me?
Right
and then
here.
I was upset. I was like, where did I shirk my own niece? I tell thousands of tourists per year, my own niece doesn't know it. So it was kind of like, wow, I want an account, not just for her. Yeah. But it did egg me along to go ahead and sit down pen to paper. And it took me 6 years to write it.
Yeah, I mean, millions of people live in that greater New York area. I mean, I know 2,300 or 2,700 died, a little under 3,000 died from the Twin Towers, but many people, thousands more, had health issues like you, or knew somebody who died. So it it impacted directly millions of people, but directly probably hundreds of millions of people.
Yes.
around the country and the world. So it was a very devastating attack.
Yes.
What's one thing you want to make sure people know about 9/11?
Let's see, one thing.
Or two.
I guess that, the very bare bones of the act itself, from it was the first time in history that terrorists or people got together to plan out to kill people and to take them hostage on the planes. I mean, the planes had been taken hostage before, obviously, September 11, 2001. But to turn those, passenger aircraft into missiles, that alone, and it's still to this day the worst terrorist attack in world history. It hasn't been that moniker hasn't been supplanted, at this point, 20 years later. It still is the worst terrorist attack. And, in this day and age, when, we pick up the newspaper and we hear about terrible things happening around the world to others, it was other cultures, other communities, other countries. It seems far away, and it happened on our soil. And it wasn't just an attack against New York or DC. It was an attack meant for the entire country.
Yes.
They targeted our military strength, or they targeted our government. They targeted our finance and business sector. And it was meant for the country as a whole.
Yeah, because there was another attack that was thwarted by the folks that are on the plane.
That was meant to go to
the Pentagon. So yeah.
Well, they say the Capitol or the White House, which was Flight 93, was meant to go to, and they're not sure. No, actually, I've heard recently that people are less thinking that was meant for the White House. That was more meaning to go to the Capitol. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But it was, just the fact that it was meant for all of us. That it's just something that we, as a country, we just need to rally around the fact that, we're a community here, that it didn't happen up there in New York or over here or 20 years ago. that it's, we're in a new age. We've gone into a new age of terrorism, and younger people aren't familiar with what it was like before, where you didn't have that kind of airport security. I take people to the Statue of Liberty. Now we have to go through all of these checkpoints, so that's all new, and that the fact that we have now a Department of Homeland Security, but we're in a new age. It ushered us into a new age. And that's just, it's part of our history. And, I feel like the world is moving in that direction. And that we all, we need to stay a united country.
Yeah. And for those who are saying, well, what about Pearl Harbor, when you had referenced this is the worst terrorist attack in history for us? Pearl Harbor was an act of war. 9/11, there was no war. This was straight out an attack to declare essentially war on us. So that was a different time, and it was just one target was a military base. Pearl Harbor was a military base. So that's the difference between what happened in Pearl Harbor and what happened. I mean, it's a dumbed down version of it, but that's essentially the major difference between Pearl Harbor and 9/11. Anything else you want to make sure to emphasize or say, or make sure people you want to hit home for people?
Well, I always like to. It's such a sad topic. COVID is a sad topic. It's been tough. The last couple of years, and then with COVID, and then coming up on a 20th anniversary. In my 51 years, I guess. So one thing that these two tragedies say to me is that, and this sounds so trite, but it really is true, that we need each other. We do. We need each other. We need to care about each other. We're kind of all in this together. Whether people are different religions, whether people have different political views, that they're going down the road of hate for, in whatever capacity. It just winds up in a no man's land. And just we're, as human beings, who we all, have with our different human experiences, we all are connected to each other to a degree, and just small acts of even kindness or just caring, it actually has a ripple effect. And just know that everything you do, really does have a ripple effect on everybody. You're not just an island. That we all have a huge capacity to take people down a bad road, or to lift people up. And I know that sounds trite, but it's just something I feel like I've thought a lot about, especially in the last year of the whole, getting over the COVID thing, because I actually believe I'm still alive because people cared about me. People prayed for me. They brought over food, because you know what? In this day and age, when we are all calling up, grocery stores or CVS, whatever, to bring things, we were in a position where deliveries were not happening at the time. We actually did need people to come and drop off food, like the 50s, right? But the fact is involving people in our pain who wanted to bless us, which includes, again, prayers and words of encouragement. I absolutely believe that turned the tide in my body of wanting to survive something that was trying desperately to kill it. It wasn't me and my strong fortitude, or, I outthought it. No, it was knowing all these people cared. And it's something that's was just something that really has impressed me, especially in this past, since March 2020. But it was, I saw it right after 9/11 too, how people came together and showed that, we care about you, because we all can move forward, or we can all hold each other back.
And I'm going to say something scientifically stupid, but when you have that people caring, and they care, it sends out like that endorphins out there, that chemical in your body is trying to heal yourself in a way, but it's inspired by other people's act of generosity and kindness. And I sort of believe that the body can heal itself. I mean, the body's got its own limitations, but I think if you get that injection, along with everything else that you're taking with the medication and all that, it helps. It doesn't hurt. It obviously doesn't hurt.
Yes.
But I think those, and I said that's why it's scientifically stupid, because I don't know if I'm saying it right, or if it's any accurate, if there's any accuracy at all. But that's just my belief. So.
Well, but it's, the fact is we all have a role to play to lift each other up. I do mission trips, or humanitarian trips, if you will, for my church, and I've done that for the last 10 years. And we've been to the same orphanage in Johannesburg, South Africa, for 10 years. We have a year-long relationship with this particular orphanage. And I've watched the kids grow up. We help support it throughout the year. And so there was somebody who was there who was trying to get do a FaceTime call with the children and myself. And it was when there was one particular night that I feel like I almost died. And my body was actually shutting down, and I felt like I was checking out. And not looking back, it was very scary. But literally, my brain was saying goodbye to its surroundings. And I remember I get this FaceTime call, and I pick up the phone, and it's the kids, the teenage girls specifically, from this orphanage called the 5 C's. And the kids were singing to me. They were praying for me. She would pan all the kids who I know so very well. And there was part of me that was looking at them, almost my body was saying goodbye to them. But I almost feel like that actually sucked me back into life. Wow. There was literally it's almost like it took me by the chest and pulled me back here. And all it took was some singing and saying hi. But it's just it's
a scientifically stupid theory in full effect there.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, Christina, I appreciate the time that you've spent with me. I'm definitely going to need you to come back on, because we got to talk, one, about this mission trip that you went on. Wow. And then two, your other book. And do you have anything else in the works? Are you going to be producing another book?
Well, here's the good news. The next one's a happy book. Okay, I'm not that gloom and doomish, right? I had reasons that I wanted to talk about my COVID experience, and where I do talk actually a lot about our connection to each other and how much those connections kept me alive. And then 9/11. But the next one is, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a fun book, and I've already started I'm going to call it Confessions of a New York City Tour Guide. I've had a lot of fun things happen on tours.
I could see that as a movie.
And I have like a Devil Wears Prada-ish. I know exactly. And I have a really good memory. But more than that, all the shenanigans or crazy things that happen, they're all written down. And so I did keep diaries. But also, if something nutty happened on the tour, I had to write, the owners of the companies I was freelancing with. So they had a heads up that this nutty situation happened. I've got thousands.
How long until we get to see that book?
After this year's 9/11, I'm going to continue it, but it's going to be a fun and funny romp through essentially almost 30 years of being a New York City tour guide, because there's been some funky things can happen in New York City.
It's been known to have a little bit of shenanigans happening there.
The next one will be funny. I promise.
Right. Well, great. Well, Christina Ray Stanton, I appreciate the time, and thank you very much for being on Let Me Ask You Something.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you.